great. Good morning. This has been an incredible morning, don't you think? I'm very glad I skipped breakfast, number one. And I should have gotten credit for being a javelin thrower in college. So those are the two things I've learned today. Well, I want to talk to you maybe a little less about technology and a little bit more about business, because I spend my time working with a lot of very early stage companies. By the end of this presentation, it looks like 16 minutes and 31 seconds, you're going to learn three things about me. The first is that I love metaphors, but of course that doesn't mean that I won't work them to death and mix them. Secondly, I took 5 semesters of algebra, and yet I am no friend of numbers. So there are some calculations here that please don't grade. They are approximate and kind of meant to be a benchmark. And the third thing is that I really think of ideas as pollen. And the real great thing about ideas is we can spread them, and that pollen can land in some other fertile territory. You can take these ideas, it grows and gets better. That's the best thing. So I'm hoping today to share with you an idea that's a pretty new idea for me, something I've just really started thinking about how businesses are transforming and how we are at a place where there's an opportunity to rethink the way businesses get big. So I know we're talking about big ideas and playing big. I'm going to posit to you that my idea that we should actually be big in business by staying small. So let's take a look at that. And so my metaphor, the sumo wrestler and the Peloton. So let's consider first the sumo wrestler. Now this guy is big. There are about 700 sumo wrestlers, professional wrestlers in Japan. They are big. On average, they weigh somewhere between 250 and 500 pounds. They're obviously very strong guys. They're very competitive in their field. They're reactive. In that ring, they can react and move very quickly. But often outside the ring of competition, you wouldn't really want one of these guys to be in a sprint. Finally, they're very tradition-bound. There's a long, long history and rich tradition around sumo wrestling. Now, I want you to consider the Peloton. This is a team that works together. They're compact. They ride very efficiently together. In fact, by riding together, the Peloton conserves about 40% more energy than if you were cycling by yourself. So there's a great deal of leverage strength to the Peloton. They're absolutely competitive, but they're also very proactive. They're able to shift and move and take advantage of the opportunities that arise to them. So they're agile, they're fast, they're adaptive, and they're essentially, among sporting teams, very, very entrepreneurial. Now, in the world of business, it's the big business that's the sumo wrestler. These large businesses are resource-rich, and they have tremendously strong brand power. They have great reach. They have a really rich and strong legacy. There's nothing wrong with big business. This is the way we've been building companies. And as entrepreneurs, we often aspire to become a big business. And that creates roots in the community. It creates an opportunity to grow and expand. The Peloton, as you might guess, is a small business, the kinds of businesses that pepper main streets all around the world. These businesses are resource constrained, and I think in some ways that creates a benefit, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But they're restrained by their financial resources often, but they're so engaged with their customers that they really understand the communities that they are serving. And there's a great deal of power in that local position of a small business. They are adaptable. They can shift as their markets shift. And often they're very innovative. And here's where resource constraint comes in. When you have less and you still have to solve big problems, you get a lot more creative. And small businesses, startup businesses, entrepreneurial businesses do that every day. They do more with less resource. And I would argue that it's that resource constraint that makes them most innovative. Now, as entrepreneurs, we're often told we want to go be big sumo wrestler businesses. Has anyone here raised money with a venture capitalist or tried to? Right? And the question is always, how big can this business get? How many zeros can you aspire to be? How big of a sumo wrestler can you be? I would argue that we're asking the wrong questions, and we're at a place in business now where we can start asking different questions about bigness. So big businesses, the Fortune 500, it's a very small number of businesses that actually aspire or actually achieve that status, 500 businesses. They do about $9 trillion in revenue worldwide, employ 610 billion people. I'm sorry, I said that backwards. 610 billion in profits, only about 25 million employees. And on average, typical, and this is where my bad math comes in, so if you're doing the division, it gets somewhere around $368,000 per worker. Now in some businesses like oil and gas, it's about $1 million per worker. In more retail businesses, big box retail, it's about 200,000. So there's a kind of efficiency, we could argue, to small business in terms of how much revenue per employee is generated. Now you contrast that to small business. These are the other 29,599,500 businesses in the United States. Most of them, I think these are, there we go, it's 99% of all the businesses in the US. Now, of the 29 million businesses in the US, those are, I believe it's about 25, 26 million that are considered to be small businesses. Most of them don't employ anyone at all. They're sole proprietorships, but about 6 million have one or more employees. And of those, they're employing 115 million people just here in the United States, with annual revenues of about $22 trillion, again, just here in the US. Now, if you do the math here, it comes out to a little less favorably, we might suggest, in a small business, but still, I think, a strong impact if, obviously, you multiply it across the size of businesses in the US. Now, most people would look at the long tail and say, big business is where it's at. That's where all the value is, and all those small businesses are doing a nice thing for the world, but big business is it. If big business combined, if the Fortune 500 were a country, it would be the second largest economy in the world. The second largest country by economy. But I think it's time for us to rethink this and really think about the value that's created by small business. And if you turn this graph on its side, the value creation that is created by small business, by entrepreneurial endeavors, is so much significantly larger than just the Fortune 500. I would posit if you could combine, if you could aggregate all small business, all those mom and pop shops and sole proprietorships and consultancies and retailers, you would create an economy that is the largest in the world. And in fact, in the US, small business accounts for more than half of the GDP. So I want you to think a little bit differently about small business, because the other advantage of small business is, again, thinking about the Peloton. They're agile, they're quick, they're able to adapt. And some of the greatest technologies of the last decade have come out of very small entrepreneurial companies. Now, sure, some of the large companies have acquired these firms. They've gone on to go and invent some other technologies, but you think of things that are now common in your life. DVRs, you all have a DVR, a TiVo or something, right? That wasn't a big company. Philips thought about how they could do that. Scientific Atlanta was working on a set-top box. They couldn't get it to market, but this little startup called TiVo did. Think about software as a service. Today, Oracle and SAP, they are lumbering under their weight as sumo wrestlers to be reactive, to transform their software into a service. But it was a bunch of little startups, Salesforce.com, chief among them, that really created this marketplace. Little companies create new markets. Little companies can innovate faster. And I think it sets a different kind of model for how we think about business going forward, where we really need to stop putting all of our focus on the Fortune 500 and start thinking a little bit more about the Fortune 500,000. These are all those small businesses that have the ability to work well together. Individually, they're very strong and very capable. But because they're small and because they're adaptive, they can come together in a collective in an interesting way to attack new markets. And so going forward, and this is the idea that I've been playing with, I think we come to a place where these highly adaptable businesses begin to come together, attack a market, kind of like molecules. You know, you get together, the atoms come together to solve a problem, and then they break apart and reconfigure to go after another part of the market. I think this is how business is going to be measured in the future. How adaptable are you at coming together and creating opportunity and creating a new value for your consumers and for the ecosystem in which you live? So this kind of capital efficient business, if we think about the kind of value that can be created, if we use that calculation of revenue per capita, I think we're going to see a great deal of growth happening in this small business sector. These adaptable small businesses that can continue to grow, really outpacing the sumo wrestler businesses that are just struggling under their own weight. So that's the idea that I've been thinking about a lot, and I would really encourage you to think about how you and your business can become part of the Peloton and create new value in your organizations. And if this idea is something that sparks anything in you, I really do encourage you to take hold of it, create conversation around it, Twitter it, blog about it, and let's try to make it so. Thank you very much.